Good, thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the last day of AWP. I'm Travis Karowski. I'm a member of the AWP Board of Directors. Here's a brief visual description of myself. I'm wearing a black jean jacket, I have pale skin, and black hair. The Association of Writers and Writing Programs is a small but mighty nonprofit organization that amplifies the voices of writers and the academic programs and organizations that serve them, all while championing diversity and excellence in creative writing. I'm a member of AWP's Board of Directors, but first and foremost, since 2006, I'm a member of AWP. Membership provides me with the writing resources year-round, but just as importantly, more importantly really, it allows me to support other writers, especially those who are just starting out. My membership dues help writers find meaningful careers and publication opportunities and make services like our Writer-to-Writer mentorship program possible. And if you aren't already a member, I invite you to become one. We are delighted to bring you this event today. I'd like to acknowledge and thank all of our conference sponsors and the literary partner hosting this event, Red Hen Press. Our literary partners and sponsors allow AWP to prevent these extraordinary literary events and help us keep our conference affordable and accessible. Please join me in thanking all of our conference sponsors and partners for their support and participation. Okay, really quick, the usual housekeeping. Please silence your cell phones. Remember, there is no flash photography during the event. Respect seats marked as reserved for attendees with accessibility needs. Please give the authors about 10 to 15 minutes after the presentation because they have to walk all the way down the hall to get to the book signing table. Thank you, and now it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome Kate Gale, who will introduce and run this fantastic event.
I'm Kate Gale. I'm the co-founder, publisher, managing editor of Red Hen Press. It's been quite an adventure being in Los Angeles in 2025. We have a saying at Red Hen Press, and that saying is, what matters is how you walk through fire. When we say that, we did not mean literal fire. We meant metaphoric fire. This year, in January, we had decided that we were going to raise money to build a big website, and that website was going to allow us to sell books directly through an e-commerce platform. We were very excited about our plans. We didn't even get back to the press until the end of January because most of Pasadena was on fire. And by the time we got back, Pasadena was still burning. The fire was about 70% contained, and there was a camp of homeless people in our parking lot. They had kind of a fire ring with a big gas tank, and the roof had blown off of the press and was in shards in the parking lot. So we started getting quotes to replace the roof. This took a long time, and during that time, it started to rain. We have about 100,000 books at the press, and so we were then covering those books with tarps. So let's say for the country, for the community, it's been a rocky start to 2025. But here we are at AWP, and in its most ideal sense, AWP is a place for community. When I remember the best parts of AWP, I remember being at AWP in Baltimore, where it's going to be next year, and I remember Lucille Clifton coming over to the Red Hen booth and saying to me, "Kate, you really do publish good books." And I thought my heart was going to leap out of my throat. I wrote my dissertation partly on Lucille Clifton's poetry, and she was one of the people who made me want to be a poet and made me want to go into publishing. And so when you are at AWP and you meet someone who is one of your heroes, that's why you came. And there's lots of things about AWP that I'm sure bother everybody, but the good parts of AWP are when you remind yourself that you're part of a literary tribe. This group that are here today are partly my literary tribe and partly people that inspire me to be a writer, and I'm so glad that all of them agreed to be on this panel. Will Alexander is very, very much a Los Angeles treasure. His poetry, like that of Robinson Jeffers, has a mystical quality to it, a connection to nature, a quality of the existential, a connection to the mind, and at the same time feels very much connected to the West. Peggy Shumaker's poetry, like that of Jane Hirshfield's, is connected to the divine, to nature, and in all of her poetry, there's this sense of spiritual community. Alison Hawthorne Deming, this is the first time Red Hen has published her. We're so excited about this book. And all of her work asks us what our responsibility is to this planet. What is our level of attention to detail? Harryette Mullen's work asks us about the slippage between words and music and colonization and language. Harryette Mullen's work is the work that we read before we go to bed at night, and it asks us to change ourselves in the world. So thank you all so much for being here with us. Each of these poets is going to read. Thank you all so much for being here. We're going to start today with Will Alexander.
First, pulling some books out here. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your presence here, of course. And I'm going to start with one of my unknown volumes, seemingly unknown. It was actually my second book out of the first. Right now I'm over 40 books. So it's called Texas Blind Salamander Feelings. Anybody know about the Texas blind salamander? They haven't seen one since 1952, by the way. Texas blind salamander feelings. The Texas blind salamander was born without sight, naturally. And so I related this volume to abstract painting, or like things that you'd see in Mata or Joan Miro. And I haven't seen these poems in many years. And it was rescued from oblivion. It's going to be published in northern England somewhere. And I'm looking at the lighting here. It's called Innominate Panorama. Being a rush of myth and vapor, there exists a panoramic flare from poetic jackals' blazes, appearing on lower planes as the froth of refraction. Here, the scarlet base of bluish jaguar's ink, of sculpted swans inside the ash of seminal polar initiation. Not unlike the dialectics of water, having the somnolent power of vertiginous cobalt emanation. Each meadow of ferocious bleeding, like a naked armistice of smoking sanguinary flowers, evolving higher and higher into hackias of crystal, into eclipsed meridians, far beyond protoplasmic complication. One then sees a realm of lighted Emphian pheasants, flying in circles in a violet unicorn's palace, where there electrically proliferates ozonal spells, osmotic snows, being flakes of weightless rainbow jonquils, transcending the dark of oily dragon fang auroras. That's my second book, but I'll read from a more prolifically or closer in time. This was done in the last part of the 20th century, and I was fortunate to have all 4 of my blurbs from women writers. One of which was the late Leslie Scalapino, and I'm proud to share the panel with Miss Mullen over here, who did one of the blurbs. And I'll read a piece from here. It's called The Impalpable Brushfire Singer. No, he is not an earned singer, nor does he carry on rapport with negative forces within extinction. He is the brushfire singer who projects from his heart the sound of insidious subduction, of blank anomaly as posture, of opaque density as ash. He, distanced from prone ventriloquial stammer, from flesh and habit and drought. This performer, part poltergeist and orisha, part broken in cellular dove, part glance from floating mango bastions, where the spires of butane, where their photographic fractals are implanted with hypnosis. Because he allegedly embodies a green necrotic ember, more like a vertical flash or a fire rod, posing like a tempest in a human chromium palace. Therefore his sound, a dazed simoom in a gauntlet, a blizzard of birds burned at the touch of old maelstroms. Because he gives off the odor of storms, this universal orisha, like a sun that falls from a compost of dimness, out of deproductive hydrogen sums, out of lightless fissures which boil outside the planet. Yes, he sings at a certain pitch which has evolved beyond the potter's field, beyond a tragic hummingbird's cirrhosis, surmounting primeval flaw, surmounting fire which forms in irreplaceable disjunction. Under certain formations of the zodiac, he is listless. He intones without impact his synodic revelations no longer of the law, of measured, palpable destinations, because he sings in such a silence that even the rishis can't ignore. As though the hollow power which rearises from nothingness perpetually convinces, like a vacuum which splits within the spinning arc of an intangible solar candle. Such power can never be confusedly retraced because it adumbrates and blazes, like a glossary of suns, so that each viral drill, each forge casts a feeling which insaturates a pressure, bringing to distance a hidden and eluded polarity, like a subjective skill, corroded and advanced. He sings beyond the grip of a paralytic nexus, where blood shifts beyond the magnet of volume, where the nerves no longer resonate inside an octagonal maze stunk at its source by piranhas. So I'll try, I don't want to take up too much time here, but I have this former volume here from, earlier volume here from City Lights. And let me read some of the real smaller pieces, and I was going to read one on Cesar Vallejo. I think it's too long for the situation at hand. But if you can pick it up, it'll be around, and from City Lights in San Francisco. And looking for this The Delusion formation. I'll close here. If one believes oneself as stasis, there exists no neural density or scar. One then saturates as ash, as pointless cannibal's lethargy, as dislodged ink from a podium or a treatise. One comes to know demobility as a craft, an art which solders itself to specifics. Yet to know one's not sequestered through mundane advancement as doorway or basic habit as speculation. I am speaking of chastisement or cross-referential superimposition. Within this condition, I am more like the snow, like a crow from crucial underwater fires. A crucial underwater crow, neither Chinese or Shinto, but of the black dimensionality as hidden underwater mass, which persists by daring, which seems at the surface a purposeless or a pointless mandrel's infection. Saying such, I consider myself a reddish Shinto crow, then just as strongly a black anathema crow. Then just as quickly a sun-fed crow from snow-washed volcanoes. So I look to myself as winter, as inclement carrion manga, as flight through great electrical haze. I being the blur who shapes the Empyrean, who invokes withdrawal, who instills in his forces stunning psychic transference. Thank you for your time.
Hello, everyone. I'm Peggy Shumaker, and I'm glad you're here. The moon shines equally. It's not a bad night for the moon. The moon has a place to live. Nobody took its kids away. The moon doesn't skip meals so its kids can eat. The moon put itself through college. Nobody can take that away. If it wanted, the moon could get a second mortgage. The moon's daughters are not addicts, its sons not in prison. The moon watches a new hatch of rattlesnakes. Moonlit, they rise from cold earth, hated, though they do not know they are hated. Like us, they want the best they can to live. The moon promises them no protection. It gives what it has, secondhand, wound cleansing, light, full of longing. We have in the West the unholy trinity of drought, flood, and fire. This next one, a poet friend, lost her home in the campfire a few years ago, and the first 4 words are a command she got from her insurance company. It's called Red Sky. List everything you've lost. Ars Poetica of heartbreak. What's possible to replace what never is? The sky's memory, smoke. Say a wall of flame sears inside your eyelids every time you close them. What wish floats on streams of ash? What sky remains? In the waiting room, on the never-off TV, a river of poor people draws near the line. The talking head's scarlet lips say, officials can process only a trickle each day. Thousands gather. Next to me, a woman with a fistula, mature and swollen, woman with her upper arm wrapped in saran, woman with a beatific smile says, why process them? Just send them back. Say a girl knows early, knows as a doctor she wants to improve world health. Say this girl hears along the way what girls can't do. Say she laughs. Say she prepares herself to laugh a lot. Say this season coyotes sleek and shiny gorge, plenty of rabbits. Sure-footed javelina brush by creosote's tiny yellow blossoms, nip new paddles of prickly pear. In their burrows, whip-tail lizards, shedding rattlers, scholarly and deliberate Gila monsters repose, patient as earth. Thanks. There are people who, for a variety of desperate reasons, try to walk across the desert. This is called the rule you do not break. You offer water always in the desert. Water to anyone who walks. Water to every creature. Walk even for 1 hour without water, and you begin to become desert. Every cell inside you, desert. If you walk here without water, your body soon waters the desert. Your bones walk. No más muertes. It's always fascinating to me that the place we call Tucson, Arizona, was once underwater. Desert where once was ocean. Ask me where the water went. Ask me why the ocean left behind hard evidence, cities of trilobites. Ask me about echoes of lives lived fully, birth to death, millions of years ago. And now, what's left? Ask me. Mudflats crack, fields of pottery shards, sandscapes smoothing shells that once housed scuttling hermits. Remind me that creatures who carried frilled and gorgeous gills outside their bodies vanish. Remind me that we have no idea what they desired or dreamt. We know only that they danced in water without waiting for anyone to ask. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Great thanks to Red Hen Press for the beautiful job they did with my book, which is called Blue Flax and Yellow Mustard Flower. This poem is set in Sedona, Arizona. National Forest. Bell Rock, Courthouse Rock, Devil's Bridge. Time has made the landforms, and they grow more beautiful with age. Names come from the human world, possession bleeding into perception. What if the land had its own language? No alphabet, but steady drone of grasslands, groans of mountains, drought fires scream, a drawn-out cry, hiss of rain, simmer of seeds stirring restless in the soil, pure presence and process breaking into the place made new by cataclysm. That's the planet speaking. And she cares about the fissures in the dry riverbed, about the lack of ripe cherries in Washington and blue crabs in Maryland, Savannah lions down by half. She cares about the sunrise, dandelions, and PCBs. She embraces whatever we give her, blood, bone, rust, become her. She invented us to do the work care implies. Invented us to invent words, the thicket of endless possibilities. So death does not get the last word. So groan and hiss could be accompanied by our chatter, dirge, thesis, and psalm. So I tried to pick poems about the West. This is my least West book. I've got poems from the Galapagos, Greece, Spain. But here's one from Tucson, and this is in community with all that you've suffered here in Los Angeles. We, of course, have had our fires. This is called The Buck. The Bighorn fire came within a mile of my house. It owned me for several weeks. The smoke stopped my daily walks and kept windows closed day and night, go bag ready. I watched the mountains, fireline brilliant orange against the char of night, as the blaze snaked along the ridge in its advance, closer and closer, then farther and farther as crews turned the fire, driving it away from our homes. The buck made his way from Doug firs to townhomes, over 4-foot brick wall to my bird bath. I caught him on a field cam after my Swiss chard and lettuce was chomped to the nubs, and I couldn't picture what creature could wreak such damage. But when I imagined the cost for him to grow the 6-point rack that shone in the photo like branches of a moonlit tree, when I imagined the thorny scrub he'd fed on as he fled his range, and then his pleasure, finding tender green leaves new to his palate, soft on his lips, yielding to the blunt teeth, I felt the fool, no, criminal, for thinking him the thief, when our kind has stolen nearly everything from the animal world. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So there's a set of 8 epistolary poems in this book, and I'll just read one of them, and they're entitled Dear America, and they're my attempt to capture this terrible cognitive dissonance we're living with of the beauty of this place that we live and the horrible violence in its history and its present moment. So I'd like to read this poem because it will give you this title. It will give you some resonance for where the title's coming from. Inspired by a reading tour I did in North Dakota, near the Minot Air Force Base. Dear America, I know it's hard to speak of how we've been wounded. I mean, all those children murdered in their school. I mean, the man stepped on by a cop for so long he died under the fucker's foot while 3 other cops stood watching. I mean, 400 years robbing people of homeland, chaining them, breeding them, lynching them, stripping them of culture, language, belonging, giving them the masses name. I mean the sunflower fields in North Dakota, where your nuclear arsenal lies buried, each silo surrounded with chain link and 3 strands of barbed wire. The missileers at work, generation after generation, memorizing the launch codes, then playing cards or writing poems. No lie, I heard a poet ran a workshop in a Minot bar. Anything to stall the boredom of another shift when nothing happens while they wait for word to start the worst that can happen. Above them, tractors ply fields of blue flax and yellow mustard flower. And I'll close with the shortest poem in the book. And for those of you interested in form, it is a syllabic form and a word count poem, and it's called Question. What was that bird that just flew through my mind? Thank you.
All right. Oh, yes. Okay, so thank you. Thanks to the poets, the writers, the editors, the publishers, the teachers, the students, the readers. Thank you all. Let's see. This poem, I borrowed the title from a movie that I haven't seen, but I read about it. Sharknado. See if I can see. In the jaws of climate disaster, a hurricane hits Los Angeles, flooding the city with shark-infested seawater. As a computer-generated tempest agitates the Pacific, a rogue tornado drills into the roiling ocean, teeming with hungry sharks. In this sci-fi horror comedy that spawned multiple sequels and spin-offs, the powerful waterspout, a vortex of chaotic energy, sucks up a whirling funnel of killer fish, heaves them into the air, and drops them in the submerged coastal city to devour its hapless inhabitants. Each wave brings another attack of the venture capitalists, sharks with pearly teeth. With so much prime real estate underwater, in a devastating storm of epic destruction, predators are sure to bite. On all their ship-shape spreadsheets, there's never a trace of red. This one, I borrowed a title from Stevie Wonder. Yes, I did. Okay. Well, maybe not. Thought I could see, but maybe I can't see. Okay, so let me try this page. Yes, Pineapple Express. On its way to the coast, before delivering its juicy wet kiss, a warm breeze from the Pacific tickles the sweet, spiky fruit of a bromeliad known as pineapple, though it is neither apple nor pine. Adapted to the island climate, pineapples flourishing Fibonacci spirals, similar to a pine cone. Forbidding fruit of sultry Edens, luxuriant spread from colony to crown. Avid traveler, the pineapple, gravid voyager to distant shores. Like pine cone and apple, not native to volcanic islands in the jet stream of moist ocean air, that affluent stream of vapor in the sky transporting tons of water for torrential downpours, arriving with rivers of rain, drenching the California coast, a so-called Hawaiian storm known as Pineapple Express, non-technical term for the recurrent meteorological phenomenon. Also, a tropical cocktail and a potent strain of cannabis. You knew I'd get there. Okay, this is, I hope, Tequila Sunset. Tequila Sunset, yes. Traveling due west, bloodshot sun glares at bleary clouds, skims down adulterated blue, descending to the edge of the world, setting on fire an intoxicating scene, spectacular horizon under sky lit up in lurid hues of caution and alarm, extreme spectrum that's perfect tequila sunset. On your way to the end of the earth, you cruise the garish boulevard, blinged out with glittering rhinestones, framing ultraviolet shades, polarizing lenses to protect your vision of reality. See all the street lamps, digital billboards, and scripted neon lighting up as the sun goes down. And this one is Arroyo Seco. Arroyo Seco. Yes. Origami folded toads, lost in parched lands, where mountain snows might whet the thirst of desert flowers. Water now no longer runs or walks, skips or trickles, where once streams and rivers flowed, arteries dried up, vacant, as mysterious grooves carved into grainy surface of a distant planet. Thank you.
So, as an editor, when you're working with a prose writer, you often find out at some point whether they are what we call a plotter or a pantser. A plotter plans out their whole book in advance, and you can imagine what a pantser is. They're planning it out as they go along. Peggy, you write some prose as well, so you can think about this now, whether you're a plotter or a pantser. And so when I was thinking about this panel, I kept thinking about this and looking at all these poets' work, and one of the things I realized was that I kept thinking about whether these were poets of place, but I realized that once you have a significant body of work, it looks to me like there are poets who some of their work is sort of plotting, as in they seem to have planned it out in advance. I certainly do some of that myself. And some of it, maybe they entered it and maybe did it sort of pantser style, figured out what they were doing as they went along, as in the collection kind of came together. So I'd love to ask each of you whether you think of yourself as a writer of place, and when you think of your body of work, how much of your work you planned out a whole book, sort of like the book that Tracy K. Smith wrote that, was clearly very planned out about her father and the telescope and that kind of thing, that book, or if you have books that came together piece by piece as you were writing them. So maybe I'll start with you, Harryette.
On? Oh, all right. Well, of course, when I've heard fiction writers talk about that, and I heard plodding and panthers or pandering. But anyway, the books, I think they start not knowing anything and wondering and speculating and hoping that a book might happen and just writing down spontaneous stuff, a lot of overheard stuff. And, I tend to intermittently keep journals. And so there's the kind of nothing, and then there's the gathering, and then there's looking to see, is this going anywhere? And at a certain point, wherever I started, if there is going to be a book, usually some kind of plan does emerge. And it's sort of the plan that the book gives me as it begins to have a shape. And in this particular book, it's coming out in August from Red Hen Press. It's called Regaining Unconsciousness. Those are the poems I was reading. And I did have a list at a certain point because I thought, I keep hearing these terms I had never heard about the weather, like bomb cyclone. Sounds so ominous. And atmospheric river, and derecho, and polar vortex. So I just made a list of all these things. Pineapple Express is one of them, of course. And I thought, okay, let me see if I can write some kind of little poem about each one of these atmospheric phenomena and these meteorological terms. It's like they're trying to get our attention. Pay attention to the weather with all these very, drastic sounding metaphors. So, there is a whole thread of kind of planned poems about the weather, the climate. There's one called Inclement Weather. There's one called Weathering Steel. There's one called Weathering Hate. So I was thinking about the actual, physical climate and also our emotional climate, our political climate. So I tried to weave those things together. But that was when the book was well on its way. The book had to tell me what it was trying to do.
Yeah, what she said. I mean, I'm grateful when something that feels like it might be a poem arrives in my life, and I never turn it away from the door. And I'm usually working on nonfiction and poetry at the same time, and I will have a slightly more of a plan with a nonfiction book. But then with poetry, it has to announce itself. It has to be a discovery all along the way. And with this book, I wrote a lot of these poems during COVID. There's one or two that are clearly about COVID. One is taking a walk called Territory Drive, and we couldn't go anywhere. But I have made quite a few wonderful trips, and including one with my one grandson to the Galapagos and one with my other grandson to the Peloponnesian Peninsula. So when we couldn't travel during COVID, I pulled those notebooks out, and I just said, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to travel all these places. And after I did that, I thought, well, hey, look at what's going on in America. And that's why the Dear America poems came in as the kind of closing sequence. So yeah, it evolves, and you have an intuition for what it might be, and it begins to take form, and then you're happy that it actually does. The only book that I kind of had a vision for in the beginning was my second book, The Monarchs, which is a poem sequence of 63 or 64 poems. And I wanted to write a poem sequence because I was very anxious about ending poems and starting poems, and I thought, no, I'm just going to keep going. And I had just read, I'd read Robert Duncan, passages. I'd read Robert Pinsky's An Explanation of America, and I thought, I want to write a long sequential poem. And so even that poem, though, is weird, because it has poems about monarch butterflies, it has poem about sci-fi movies, it has the poems called Essays on Intelligence, looking at the whole panorama of intelligence across the animal world. So even that one, even though it was planned, was unplanned in the way that you have to discover it as you go. If it's not fresh for you, I don't think it's going to be fresh for anyone else. But that's part of the thrill of it. When a student asked me, well, how do you shape a poetry book? I said, well, sort of the same way you shape a poem. You know, it's a combination of your intuition and what looks good, what sounds good, what feels good, and then, you know, the arc of the whole book. And that's very much like shaping a poem, although it's bigger and harder.
I love that book so much. And I love the way that you brought research into it and a lot of emotional depth that has nothing to do with research except everything.
Yeah.
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 I've had books come in a variety of different ways. My only book of nonfiction came because I was riding my bicycle, and with the peculiar self-congratulation of the not particularly active, I felt really good. And then a kid came screaming on the bike path, screaming around a corner. He was on his four-wheel ATV. It was illegal for him to be on the bike path, and he hit me and my husband. I was pretty thoroughly squashed. And for a while, I couldn't read. My eyes worked, but they didn't coordinate. And I thought, who will I be if I can't read? Anyway, so as soon as I could, I taped up my eyelid, and I would write these little things. And I didn't call them anything, because I was just trying to write my way out of a bad place. So I smashed a bunch of them together and sent them off to an editor friend and said, it's an essay. And that was a complete delusion. And she said, it's not an essay, it's a book. And I said, no, don't make me go there. 3 years later, it was a book. But I wrote a bunch of little things. And because I didn't call them anything, everything could come in there. Memories from my grandparents, things that just occurred to me. I mean, anything could go in the book because I didn't label it too soon. That was useful. I wrote another book that's, I'm really susceptible to landscape, and I've always known that. I went to Costa Rica. We went hiking and had writing classes every day. When I came back, I continued to write, wrote. But this was a landscape utterly new to me. I grew up in Tucson. I lived at that time in Fairbanks, Alaska. I had never seen a mist forest. I had never seen all those creatures. And so those poems came very, very fast because the world was brand new to me. For most of the books, I have a book that I did in collaboration with a visual artist. If you ever get a chance to do that, having more than one imagination at work feeds both imaginations and makes a third thing. And that was fabulous. I would do it again in a heartbeat. But most of the time, for me, it's a matter of one poem coming, another poem coming, another poem coming, and then beginning to see relationships and trying to figure out if they're going to live together.
Yeah, for me, poetry, I work off the precept, not as an ideologist, but I plan nothing for any of my books. I've done over 40 of them, but however they're going to come out as an essay or a poem or an aphorism, all of those things. And once thought I was going to be an aphorist because I'd been so mesmerized by E.M. Chiran, the Romanian writer who wrote, all of his work out of Paris. But that winnowed down to my ability to scrape from other, not scrape, but let other areas erupt in my psyche, whether it was through Breton or Octavio Paz, Bob Kaufman, whoever. But Philip Lamantia, bringing these energies to bear, not as an ideologist, but as a practitioner. By the way, I just finished a new book with a series of books with my collaborator, Byron Baker. It's called Anonymous Stellar Ravines. And you can find the first volume out on Granary Books out in New York. But we've been doing this, working telepathically. He's doing the work visually, and I'm just taking the abstracts and just bringing out the language for all the 300 and almost 400 drawings. So it's called Anonymous Stellar Ravines. If you get a chance to go to the Granary Book website, just take a look at it. We just finished our second volume. We're doing 3 volumes with this automatic method. And you know, you got to get into that deeper part of the mindset, because people, this linearity is a scripted kind of I'll call it a scripted carking in the natural situation, because this whole idea in the West with this new technology it's nothing new. By the way, the Shango bone, everybody know about the Shango bone, the first mathematics came out of Africa. So we have to understand that, where it's been denigrated over space and time. And people have lost their memories in the world, by the way. But this has already been done. It's been done in Africa. By the way, the first 7 dynasties built all the pyramids. You got the heritage from Nubia into Kemet, or black soil, or black people. And we're not the Egyptians, which was actually a Greek term. But we want to get into the source material of where the pyramids came from. It came from Egyptian mathematics. Look into, anybody knows Swallow de Lubitz, the great unearther of the pyramids in terms of the mathematics of them? That's Swallow de Lubitz talks about the ancient chronicle that's been lost to the modern mind. But the modern mind has been so truncated with stereotypes, unfortunately, that we're truncated. We don't see the source from where these origins came. The earth continues to spin. And I'll say this spontaneously, even the sun is a limited resource. So it's a divine energy, but it's a limited resource. Because this James Webb telescope has taught us about some suns extend out to Saturn on this planet. So in other words, we want to go to that source of suns of suns. That's what I'm looking at, looking through suns of suns of suns, and going back into the core of things. And out of that brings language. So you go into what I consider to be the first Renaissance, was the Islamic Renaissance in 700, 800, 900, 1000. In fact, I just wrote a treatise that's coming out. It's called On Dar el-Hikmah, one of the great institutions founded in 1005 in Cairo. You know, Caliph al-Hakim. But all the genres of knowledge were taken really out of Wosei or Luxor. And Luxor, Wosei was for the higher mind, not the graded mind or the transcripted mind, but the higher mind. And that's where poetry and all of the knowledges that were endemic to the higher mind came to be thousands of years ago. And this is something that they were scripting in Granada during that time period. So, you know, we wanted to give that shout out there to bring knowledges out of one system. Like a seed, small seed grows a giant oak. That's what we want to do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't have a microphone. I like that so far we've already covered the pyramids and Sharknado. We just covered so much ground here. So because of the current time that we're in, I'm curious for each of you how much time and attention your poetry touches on the time that we're in. Maybe you don't touch it at all. I know, Alison, of course, that you've written about climate change. So maybe that's how you work on the time that we're in. You know, maybe you're just reaching back in history, and that's what you're working on. So I'm curious for each of you, how much responsibility you feel that poets have right now to interact with the time that we find ourselves in. We all know people who have just decided to leave the United States right now. We know people that have just decided to sort of shut off the news. But some of us feel that it is the responsibility for those of us who are writers to participate in at least thinking about the time that we're in right now. So again, I'll start with you, Harryette, and I'm just curious what your thoughts are. I know that you teach as well, and so I'm curious what you think about this as a writer and as a teacher.
Well, I do think about current events. I do have my no news days when I just listen to music all day. And, you know, at UCLA, we have had one crisis after another. From the pandemic on, every year there's something. And our students are exhausted and we're exhausted, and we're probably going to be the next Trump target, you know, because of the activity among our students and faculty. And, you know, because we have for the last several years had DEI statements whenever we come up for a promotion, and it's also, at least in our department, it has been, but will no longer be in applications for jobs. Just a statement, you know, it's just a statement about how your work contributes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which of course nobody wants, right? Because these are terrible things for a university especially, right? Should we go back to when universities were only for wealthy white men, that's what they were for at the beginning. So maybe that's where we're going. So I do think about these things. And sometimes I write about them. I'm the last person to tell another person what their responsibility is. I have a hard enough time thinking about what is my responsibility, but I don't think it's my responsibility to write in the moment about what's happening in the moment, because I think we can also be too hasty to have an opinion about things that we don't know enough about. You know, sometimes we need to, do research, study, talk to other people, maybe turn off my jazz station and listen to some news. But I think it is useful if you call yourself a cultural worker to have some awareness of what is happening in your culture, you know, in the past, in the present, and to think about the future if it has a future. So I'll just stop there.
Well, I think it's our job in the literary arts, to convey what is it like to be alive at this time in history as opposed to any other time. And how anybody makes that manifest is up to them. And there's a million ways to do that. But I don't see how you can not write about the times in which we live. It's impossible, because that is that's the water that we're swimming in. But there are any number of ways to think about it and to keep ourselves balanced and healthy and take a diet from the news when we need to. But I feel a responsibility to be informed. I mean, yes, the core of my work has been for Eversville, the troubled relationship between nature and culture. And I've never been able to believe, although I have to, the diminishment of the natural world at the hands of our human species. And our cruelty to one another is legend, and then our cruelty to this astonishing planet that we live on is mind-blowing. And you know, I've thought a lot about my ancestors who came in the 1600s to New England, and they came for religious freedom, for freedom of expression, and within a couple of generations, they were unjustly slaughtering women that they accused of witchcraft. And that's why my ancestor, Nathaniel Hawthorne, decided to struggle with what is the moral imagination of human beings if, we just flip from, hey, I'd like a more just world, I'd like freedom of religion, but you can't have it, and here's what I'm going to do to you. And so I think that struggle for, what is the moral intelligence of America has been ingrained in me since childhood, and is very much a part of my story. And how does that relate to the landscape and our relationship to place and community? So I'm obsessed with this stuff, and it's partly, I feel very personally the wounding of this planet at our hands, and that we are robbing the planet of so much of the life that has made this an astonishing place to live, and we do not appreciate it. And I understand the moral shortcomings of my ancestors, and when I think about what our moral shortcomings are, the list is going to be very long, much longer now since November than it ever was going to be. But I'm certain that one of our great moral shortcomings in the eyes and minds and hearts of people who come after us was, how could you destroy this planet, which is such a remarkable place that fosters life and beauty and community? How could you do this? What were you thinking? We weren't. We were just acquiring and consuming and fighting. So anyway, yeah, I could go on. But I do feel a responsibility. And the other thing I'll just shortly say is, I think there's two ways to deal with this. One is we have to take apart the systems that are unjust and pathological and cruel. But the other thing is, we're the culture makers as artists, right? We have to also be making things of beauty that we are giving to one another, so that we're also showing that here's where we can move, where language can be used not to wound and to other and to destroy, but language can really be used to build community, to shape our togetherness, to show how our hearts are connected. And so it's our responsibility to think about how language can do the beautiful things that we need, as well as destroying the way language is being used as a weapon against us. There.
Yes. What Harryette said, what Alison said. I think it's absolutely vital and life-giving that we continue to make art. I think it's absolutely vital and life-giving that we reject false choices presented to us. Wouldn't you rather feed hungry children than make art? That is a false choice, and it's put in front of us all the time. We're going to cut all the funding for the arts because it's more important to do this other thing. They don't intend to do the other thing. The people making that false equivalency don't intend to do, they don't intend to take care of folks. So for me, I would not tell anyone else what's important to do in his or her art. I would say, I'm going to write as well as I can what I can write. I'm going to try to reduce suffering whenever it's in my power to reduce suffering. But I'm not going to tell Nancy or Nicole or Erin or anyone else what she should do.
Mm-hmm. Interesting what you said. No more severity, no more death. Mm-hmm. We want to get to that level where we can get to the source material of where the mind works. I mentioned it earlier about Dar el-Hikmah and the energy that was springing out of, I'll say the Egyptian term wosei, of Luxor. The way the educational system worked was not upon grading or the temperature that's allows you to go into the corporate state or into some form of higher education, but into how do you level up your intelligence with the cosmos. And that's not a mystical term, but that's all the energy of all the knowledges that we have on Earth. It comes from the cosmos. It doesn't come. That's why animals have such an intelligence of how they can manipulate. They don't get graded on it. They just live in it. It's pre-educational. And this is what the situation was at Dar el-Hikmah, I just mentioned, was how it was for lay and professional people. The whole scale of knowledge rose to another level because during that time, armies would take books as property instead of money. They would take them as war books, and therefore they did all these congregations that are unheard of in today's modern world. Well, you got to think of Islamic and Chinese astronomy. When you talk about the Crab Nebula blowing up, in Europe it was not mentioned much, except via Islamic culture and via Chinese culture. Some scholar once said it was just a giant fog over Europe at that time. The fog was in their endemic mind. So we want to clear a lot of cobwebs up. That's what we have an educational panel for, and we're trying to deal with that with Red Hen Press and with all the great presses we have in this country, like New Directions and City Lights that I work with. But it's the mind. It's not the facade on the table. It's the way the mind is working. Our minds are working. We don't want a conscripted regionality of the mind, but how it flares out into different circumstances. During that time in Granada, it was people like Roger Bacon. A lot of Europeans were there, absorbing Roger of Sicily. It's a lot of stuff going on there. What's going on there? Mathematics and astronomy, and Abu Sa'id Sinjari. You may have never heard of the name, but he was an astronomer. My friend Avi Loeb knew this person. We talked a little bit about that when I was at Harvard, but this gentleman, Sa'id Sinjari, came about assembling the sun system 400 or 500 years before Copernicus. And so we've been starved by our informational context that we're talking about here. So anyway, I don't want to keep going on this, but my poetry comes out of that situation of this, like the way the coral bed builds up. It just accretes naturally. And the fish have prior intelligence to go around and do what they do. Natural intelligence. That's what poetry should be, a natural intelligence. It shouldn't be integrated from some kind of delimited knowledge base, but just to open it up to what's around you. So that's why I never got into ideology. I love surrealism, but I'm not an ideological person. I just script what I can do. In fact, I was just mentioning on the prior panel that the first subconscious writing was done 4,000 or 5,000 years ago in Kemet via this little-known depth psychology. Just was in Los Angeles. Dr. I'll think of his name in a minute. Dr. Richard King. And it's a depth, never gets the credit like Jung gets, but passed away here in LA about a decade ago. No claps or plaudits about it, but he mentioned this at a conference in 1984, and it was held in Atlanta. Great papers on, assembled by another great person, Ivan van Sertima. The works you can find them over at Rutgers. Anyway, I don't want to go on too long about this treatise, but that's the treatise of poetry. We're all talking about assembling here and putting it together and putting it out so we can, you just flood the world with the work. Don't worry about who does it, but just so it gets out there. That's it.
I just want to make one other comment. There are 3 women who are keeping me sane right now. One is Rebecca Solnit. By the way, 2 are historians, Rebecca Solnit and Heather Cox Richardson. I know, something can happen, and in 20 minutes they've written a brilliant analysis. I cannot do that work, but they're doing it brilliantly, and I really appreciate it. And the other woman I admire so much is the cartoonist Antel Nyes. And is that how you say her name? She was working for the Washington Post until she did the cartoon of all of the billionaires holding up their money to the big fat guy. Anyway, and then she had to quit. Anyway, look for the people who nourish you. That's all I'm going to say.
That's
Yep. Good.
I would conclude by saying that I think probably most of us here in the room are builders of culture and are builders of art, are makers of art. And we came to this for times like this. So let us continue the great work that we do. Thank you all for being here today.
All right. This was a pleasure.
So lovely.
Good to hear from you.
Mike.
Mike.
So what's the best way to go about it? I'll let you do it. Got it up? It's on my bra. That's all right. Let me see if I can, yeah. You're welcome. Thank you.